In 1984, a movie about a city kid who moved to a small town where dancing was illegal became one of the defining films of a decade. Footloose cost $8 million to make. It earned over $80 million at the box office. Its soundtrack, featuring one of the most recognizable opening songs in cinema history, sold millions of copies worldwide. The film was based on a true story. The town of Elmore City, Oklahoma, had genuinely banned dancing for religious reasons, and a group of high school students had genuinely fought to change it. But the real stories of the cast who brought Beaumont to life are more surprising than the film itself. Some became legends. One became a global icon through a completely different role altogether, and one of them was gone before he ever got to see what he might have become. This is the cast of Footloose, then and now. Here is something most people don't know about the casting of Footloose. Kevin Bacon was not the first choice for Ren McCormack. The role was initially offered to Tom Cruise, who was unavailable because he was filming All the Right Moves. Rob Lowe was also considered. Scheduling conflicts took him out of the running too. The role then went to Kevin Bacon, who was 25 years old and relatively unknown, and he made it so completely his own that it is now impossible to imagine anyone else in the part. Bacon came from Philadelphia and had been working in New York theater and film since the late 70s. He appears briefly in National Lampoon's Animal House, but nothing had broken through. Footloose changed that overnight, and his immediate response to that kind of fame was, by his own later admission, to run from it. He told Entertainment Weekly years later, "In retrospect, I probably should have embraced it more, but the movie became a teen phenomenon, and I was hell-bent on being a serious actor. I wanted to be Robert De Niro, and I was Bobby Sherman." What followed was one of the more remarkable careers in Hollywood history. A Few Good Men, JFK, Apollo 13, The River Wild with Meryl Streep. His performance in The Woodsman in 2004 is one of the bravest pieces of acting in that decade. He won a Golden Globe for the HBO film Taking Chance. He played Sebastian Shaw in X-Men First Class. In 2024, Kevin Bacon became a character in the Marvel Cinematic Universe, literally himself, kidnapped as a Christmas present by Drax and Mantis in the Guardians of the Galaxy Holiday Special because Peter Quill had grown up believing Kevin Bacon was a real-life hero because of Footloose. He and his wife Kira Sedgwick, whom he met in 1987 and married in 1988, have been together for nearly 40 years. He hosts a podcast called 6 Degrees with Kevin Bacon, built around the cultural phenomenon of 6 degrees of separation that bears his name. Ren McCormack fought for the right to dance because he believed joy was worth fighting for. Kevin Bacon has spent 40 years proving that the serious actor and the movie phenomenon were never actually in conflict. Ariel Moore was the preacher's daughter who had been testing her father's rules for years before Ren McCormack arrived and gave her a reason to push harder. She drove recklessly, surfed on the roofs of moving cars, and danced with a fury that came from somewhere deeper than rebellion. Lori Singer was 26 years old during filming, and almost nothing about her background suggested she would ever end up in a Hollywood blockbuster. Singer came from music. Her father was an internationally recognized conductor. Her mother was a concert pianist. She began studying cello at 5. At 13, she made her solo debut with the Oregon Symphony. At 14, she was admitted to Juilliard, becoming its youngest student. She was headed for Carnegie Hall. Then she pivoted to acting. Fame on television, then Footloose. She won Show West Newcomer of the Year for Ariel Moore, followed the film with The Falcon and The Snowman, and The Man with One Red Shoe, and eventually won a Golden Globe as part of the ensemble cast of Robert Altman's Shortcuts in 1993, playing a depressed cellist, playing the cello herself on screen. After the 90s, she stepped away from acting and back toward music. She has performed at Carnegie Hall and the Royal Albert Hall. She executive produced the documentary Mea Maxima Culpa, Silence in the House of God, which won 3 Emmy Awards. She is 68 years old in 2026. Ariel Moore couldn't decide between the world her father wanted for her and the one she was reaching toward. Lori Singer eventually chose both and found a way to make them the same world. Reverend Shaw Moore was not a villain. He was a grieving father who had turned his grief into law, who had watched his son die in the aftermath of a night of drinking and music, and had spent the years since trying to make sure it never happened again. John Lithgow played him at the age of 38, and he played him with a moral complexity that made the film something more than a simple story about authority versus freedom. Here is the detail that puts that performance in context. During the breaks in filming Footloose, Lithgow was on set in another film entirely. He was filming Terms of Endearment, for which he received an Academy Award nomination for Best Supporting Actor. He was simultaneously shooting both films. The range required to move between those two performances, one a repressed Midwestern reverend, the other for a warmly comic astronaut tells you something about what Lithgow was actually capable of. Before Footloose, he had already received his first Oscar nomination for The World, according to GARP. What followed was one of the most varied careers in American entertainment. Third Rock from the Sun earned him 3 Emmy Awards and 2 Golden Globes. He played the Trinity Killer in Dexter and won another Emmy. He played Winston Churchill in The Crown and won yet another. He appeared in Killers of the Flower Moon. He has written children's books, recorded albums, and performed one-man shows on stage. At 80 years old, John Lithgow remains one of the most actively working and critically respected actors in Hollywood, still preparing new stage productions in 2026. Reverend Shaw Moore eventually understood that grief had turned him into something he didn't want to be. John Lithgow spent 40 years proving that limitation is the one thing a genuinely gifted actor never has to accept. Vi Moore was the Reverend's wife, the woman who moved quietly through the middle of every argument, who understood her husband's grief better than anyone, and who slowly, carefully helped him find his way back. DIANNE WIEST was 34 years old during filming. Footloose was her first significant film role. She had spent her career on Broadway. 2 years later, she won the Academy Award for Best Supporting Actress for Hannah and Her Sisters, directed by Woody Allen. 8 years after that, she won a second Academy Award for Best Supporting Actress for Bullets Over Broadway, also directed by Woody Allen. She is one of fewer than 15 performers in history to win the acting Oscar twice. The career that surrounded those 2 Oscars was built on a consistent refusal to be categorized. The Lost Boys, Edward Scissorhands, Parenthood, for which she received an Oscar nomination, Practical Magic, Synecdoche, New York, In Treatment, for which she won an Emmy. I Care a Lot in 2021. She has 2 adopted daughters and has kept her personal life almost entirely private throughout a decades-long public career. Her long-term partner, talent agent Sam Cohn, died in 2009. At 76 years old, DIANNE WIEST continues to work. The woman who played the quiet wife in the background of a teen dance film turned out to be one of the most decorated actresses of her entire generation. Vi Moore stood in the middle and tried to hold things together. DIANNE WIEST turned out to be the one who stayed longest. Willard Hewitt was Ren's best friend in Beaumont, the good-natured local kid who couldn't dance but desperately wanted to learn, whose lesson sequence set to Let's Hear It for the Boy became one of the film's most joyful scenes. Christopher Penn was 18 years old during filming. Here is the detail about that scene that most people don't know. Penn actually couldn't dance in real life. The writers added those scenes specifically because of that fact. The awkward dancing you see on screen was entirely genuine. Penn came from Hollywood royalty in the most complicated possible sense. His father was Leo Penn, a respected television director. His mother was character actress Eileen Ryan. His older brother was Sean Penn. Christopher spent his career working very hard to be seen as something other than Sean Penn's younger brother. He came close. Reservoir Dogs in 1992 gave him a performance that made people sit up. Nice Guy Eddie played with a looseness and menace that belonged entirely to him. Short Cuts placed him in a Robert Altman ensemble. The Funeral earned him Best Supporting Actor at the Venice Film Festival. He worked steadily and consistently, but there were battles alongside the career. His daughter died from complications of premature birth. He struggled with weight and drug dependencies. His brother Sean later described those health problems as central to what happened next. On January 24, 2006, Christopher Penn was found dead in his Santa Monica condominium. The cause was nonspecific cardiomyopathy, heart disease, with prescription drugs also found in his system. He was 40 years old. His latest film, The Darwin Awards, was due to premiere at the Sundance Film Festival the following day. Willard Hewitt finally learned to dance at the end of the summer, throwing himself across the gym floor with everything he had. Christopher Penn threw himself at his career with the same energy and deserved so much more time to do it. Rusty was Willard's girlfriend, the friend of Ariel's who gave the film some of its most purely comic moments, and who wore her feelings about Willard on her face with an expressiveness that made you root for them completely. Sarah Jessica Parker was 18 years old during filming, and she almost wasn't in the movie at all. When she was first offered the part, the producers told her she would need to cut her hair short and dye it red, because the character character's name was Rusty. Parker had spent years playing Annie in the Broadway production of the same name, and her hair had only just grown back. She turned the role down. They cast someone else. Then they called her back and told her the hair wasn't a requirement anymore. She flew to Utah. Parker had been performing professionally since the age of 8. Annie on Broadway, a television series called Square Pegs. Footloose was her first significant film role. What followed was a career that moved steadily upward. Girls Just Want to Have Fun, Hocus Pocus, LA Story, Honeymoon in Vegas, before landing on the role that defined everything that came after. Sex and the City premiered in 1998. Sarah Jessica Parker played Carrie Bradshaw for 6 seasons in 2 films, and in the revival And Just Like That from 2021 to 2025. 2 Emmy Awards, 4 Golden Globes, 3 Screen Actors Guild Awards. In January 2026, she received the Carol Burnett Award from the Golden Globes, one of the highest honors in American television. She has been married to Matthew Broderick since 1997. They have 3 children. She runs her own shoe brand and serves as editorial director at a publishing imprint. Rusty was the girl who was always just to the side of the main story. Sarah Jessica Parker became the main story entirely on her own terms. Woody was Chuck's loyal sidekick, the guy who repeated everything Chuck said, who showed up wherever Chuck showed up, and who provided a kind of comic echo effect to the film's antagonist. John Lithgow was 23 years old during filming, and he played Woody with a cheerful obliviousness that made the character unexpectedly endearing. Before Footloose, Lithgow had appeared in An Officer and a Gentleman and had a stint on the television series White Shadow. The film gave him enough momentum for a 3-picture deal, including a critically noticed lead performance in Crimes of Passion alongside Kathleen Turner. He appeared in The Rock with Sean Connery and Nicolas Cage in 1996. He has worked steadily in television for 4 decades: NCIS, Criminal Minds, The Defenders, The Equalizer, I Am the Night. He has never distanced himself from Footloose and speaks warmly about the experience at fan events. He ran into Kevin Bacon by chance at a Los Angeles cinema years after filming and described the encounter with the same straightforward warmth he brought to Woody. He has one son who considers Footloose one of his favorite films. Woody followed Chuck everywhere because he was loyal and because he didn't ask too many questions. John Lithgow built a 40-year career by asking all the right ones. Chuck Cranston was the villain of Beaumont, Ariel's dangerous boyfriend, the one who challenged Ren to a tractor chicken race with holding out for a hero blasting from a ghetto blaster, who represented everything the town's power structure wanted to protect. Jim Youngs played him at 23 years old with a coiled, threatening energy that made the tractor scene genuinely tense. Youngs was born in Old Bethpage, New York, the brother of actor John Savage. He had done television work in the early 80s before landing Chuck, a role that by most accounts represented the peak of his screen career. He worked in film and television through the early 90s, with his last known credit being a guest appearance on NYPD Blue in 1995. Since then, Jim Youngs has essentially vanished from public life. No social media, no convention appearances, no interviews. He represents the category of actor for whom a defining role was also a final one, present in one of the most iconic sequences of the decade, then quietly gone. Chuck Cranston couldn't accept that the world he'd known was changing. Jim Youngs found a different kind of quiet and has kept it ever since. Ethel McCormack was Ren's mother, the woman who had uprooted their life and moved them from Chicago to Beaumont, who watched her son navigate a world she hadn't fully prepared him for, and whose quiet presence anchored the film's family scenes. Frances Lee McCAIN was 40 years old during filming. 1984 was an extraordinary year for McCAIN in a very specific way. She played 2 mothers in 2 major films released the same year: Ethel McCormack in Footloose and Billy Peltzer's mother in Gremlins. Before that, she had played the mother of Kevin Bacon's character in the Footloose source film predecessor. She was the mother in Footloose's spiritual ancestor Gremlins. She also appeared in the 1984 Gremlins as Corey Feldman's mother, and 2 years earlier, she had played Kevin Bacon's mother in a different context entirely. McCAIN is a classically trained stage actress. She appeared opposite Jon Voight and Faye Dunaway in a Los Angeles production of A Streetcar Named Desire in the 1970s. Her film career has been built on the specific skill of making parental figures feel completely real in movies that are ostensibly about teenagers. She has worked steadily in television for 4 decades, including appearances in St. Elsewhere and Grey's Anatomy. Ethel McCormack trusted her son to find his way. Frances Lee McCAIN has spent her career making sure every mother she plays feels like someone you actually know. Wendy Jo was one of Ariel's closest friends, a presence throughout the film whose most memorable moment came in the dance sequence, moving with an abandon that captured exactly what the film was arguing for. Elizabeth GORCEY was 20 years old during filming, playing a character who existed primarily to populate and animate the world around the central story. GORCEY came from acting royalty of a very specific kind. Her father was Leo GORCEY, the actor who had played the lead in the Bowery Boys series of films from the 40s and 50s, a beloved American comedian of an earlier generation. She appeared in Teen Wolf in 1985 alongside Michael J. Fox, and in the television series Max Headroom. She continued working in film and television through the 90s and 2000s, before stepping away from the spotlight. For Footloose's 40th anniversary coverage in 2024, GORCEY participated in several retrospective interviews and expressed genuine warmth about the film's legacy. She is 62 years old in 2026. Wendy Jo danced because the music was playing, and there was no good reason not to. Elizabeth GORCEY has spent 40 years finding good reasons to come back to the film that first put her on a dance floor. Footloose was released on February 17, 1984. It cost $8 million. It earned over $80 million. For a few months that spring, that opening song was playing from car stereos and in gyms and at school dances across America, carrying with it something that felt genuinely urgent. The idea that the right to move freely, to feel joy in your body, to dance without asking permission was worth fighting for. The cast who made that argument has scattered in every direction in the 40 years since. One became a global television icon. One went back to Carnegie Hall. One became the most decorated actor of his generation's television landscape. One won 2 Academy Awards and kept her life entirely to herself. One is still playing the game that bears his name, and one was found alone in his apartment at 40 years old before any of it had properly begun. But somewhere in Elmore City, Oklahoma, the real town where real teenagers fought for the right to dance, someone is probably still dancing. That was the cast of Footloose, then and now.